All right, everybody, let's get started. This is the first session after lunch, and our speakers are Sarah Powazek and Shannon Pierson, and their topic is CyberCAN, a roadmap for municipal support of nonprofit cybersecurity in SF. And I want to remind you all that we will take Q&A questions through Slido. So make sure you have the Slido app on your phone. If you don't have the Slido app, you can still participate if you go to slido.com, type in BSides, or you can also type in BSidesSF.org/Q&A. After the talk, the speakers will chat with you at CityView. If you have questions, we encourage you to walk with the speakers upstairs so that we don't crowd the aisles here and cause a safety hazard and get myself and John here in trouble. And then one reminder, you can support charities EFF, Internet Archive, California Community Foundation by buying a t-shirt by the coat check on the 4th floor. T-shirt sales go until 5:30 p.m. today. And that is all for me. Take it away, Sarah and Shannon.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Ooh, good to see everybody. You're so full from lunch. It's nice to meet you. My name is Sarah Powazek. I'm the Program Director of Public Interest Cybersecurity at the UC Berkeley Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity. Go Bears!
Go Bears. And my name is Shannon Pierson. I'm a Senior Fellow in the Public Interest Cybersecurity Program.
So you probably haven't heard the term public interest cybersecurity, but instead of explaining it, I'm going to show you our brand new sticker, which describes public interest cybersecurity as the idea that community security is the same thing as national security. And what we mean by that is that oftentimes when you look at an individual organization, that alone, even if it was hit by the worst ransomware attack in the world, oftentimes doesn't really meet the threshold of a national security threat. But we believe that taken as a whole, all these sorts of organizations that uphold public life really do meet that threshold, and that we need to start thinking of local cybersecurity in the same breath as national cybersecurity so that we can give them the same types of resources that we do for the very, very large companies. So we're here to talk to you today about nonprofit cybersecurity. You all probably know this very well, so I won't belabor the point, but typically the organizations that provide essential public services tend to be the least prepared to deal with cybersecurity threats. And this is especially true for nonprofits. They have very small budgets, they have very small staff, and they provide really critical services. They don't handle downtime very well. We're talking about organizations like food banks, like homeless shelters, addiction services, legal services. If you don't make use of these, you might not think of them very often, but if you're one of the people that depends on these to get through life, you very much notice their absence. And we don't want these nonprofits to be on their own for cybersecurity. So that is what this project is about. A couple nonprofit cyber incidents that I think help illustrate this point. One in 2020, a hunger relief organization in Philadelphia lost nearly $1 million due to a cyber attack and forced it to redirect funds that it was using to build a community kitchen where folks could come in and cook healthy meals together. So that really illustrates the fact that when nonprofits lose money, it does take it away directly from their missions. They don't have a ton of overhead, which is funds that they use to maybe pay salaries or buy extras. Most all of their funds are going directly towards their mission. So when they lose money, either recovering from an incident or actually having to pay a ransom or having money stolen from them directly, that money is coming away from direct resident services. The second is in 2022, cybercriminals stole the personal data of more than 500,000 people from the International Committee of the Red Cross. This was big news in 2022 and illustrates another risk that nonprofits face with cybersecurity, which is that they're often working with our most vulnerable populations, folks that really rely on them for services. And so they thus have very sensitive information about people, such as people separated from their families, missing persons, refugees. So this type of information is all the more important to protect. Now, before I talk about our research project, I wanted to give one flag, which is that we care a lot about studying these communities and we care a lot about helping them directly. We are researchers, we're here to present our research, but there are lots of programs that do provide direct assistance to nonprofits that we want to give shout outs to, one of which is the UC Berkeley Cybersecurity Clinic, which is a program that trains students at Berkeley, graduate and undergraduate in any degree program, to provide a pro bono risk assessment to nonprofits, totally for free. They support organizations at Berkeley that are facing politically motivated threats. So they've worked with sexual and reproductive healthcare organizations, with refugee assistance organizations, with anti-human trafficking organizations, and they provide that completely for free. And we're going to bring that up a little bit later, but wanted to shout out that, like, even though we're not directly helping these organizations, we care a lot about helping get them this assistance, and we hope that this research will help connect nonprofits to even more resources to help improve their cybersecurity. So on that note, this project really came about from the idea that cities actually should be hubs of cyber defense. People typically think about cities as victims. We see cities as ransomware victims in the news pretty much every week now, but they're not typically thought of as part of the solution. And we believe that especially large, highly technical cities like San Francisco can be a huge part of the solution of protecting under-resourced organizations. For these three reasons that I'll go over very briefly, which is that they already have working relationships with nonprofits. Many cities actually give grants directly to nonprofits that are providing these sort of direct services for residents. They have an established relationship. There's trust there, which you all know is so important in getting folks to make cybersecurity changes. Number two, they have special knowledge about public interest cybersecurity. Who better than the city IT worker to understand budget constraints, to understand how important the mission of the work is, and how to do a lot with what you're given? And three, cities' digital equity objectives align with cybersecurity. Many cities, including the city of San Francisco, have digital equity departments whose entire job is to make sure that technology is available to everybody who needs it, and that everybody who needs it is safe when they use it. So there's a lot of specialized expertise within cities that matches really well to this type of work.
Yeah, and our center is not too far away from San Francisco. We're just across the bay, and we have a really close relationship with San Francisco's Department of Technology. So this is the department that's responsible for protecting all of the city's digital assets and securing all of the city's networks. We talk with them all the time about the many ways that they ensure that the data that they have and manage from residents is stewarded correctly and safely, as well as like ensuring the continuity of operations of a lot of important city services that if suffered like a cyber incident, like what would they do? So we've learned a lot from them. We talk a lot with them, and they're really unique in that they have been asking questions about how they can do more. How can the city of San Francisco's Department of Technology potentially extend its resources to nonprofits? As Sarah said, the city does provide grants to nonprofits in order for those nonprofits to conduct, provide different services like social services that the city just may not have the infrastructure to do. In a way, they are kind of extensions of city infrastructure, and that's kind of the perspective of the Department of Technology of San Francisco. So they have working relationships with these nonprofits and had heard anecdotally that the nonprofits were struggling, specifically with business email compromise, phishing scams, but these were anecdotes and they didn't have any hard data. So they called upon us to kind of generate some more information about this so that we could understand like what specifically nonprofits are struggling with in terms of cybersecurity, what resources do they have, what resources do they want, and to come up with some ideas for what the city of San Francisco could actually do to kind of improve the situation. Ooh, getting ahead of myself. Sorry. Yes, so we figured that the best way to do this would be to deploy a bulk virtual survey, which we sent to every nonprofit that we could find within San Francisco, so around 220 of them. And we started mapping out the kinds of questions and topics that we wanted to learn about. But we figured that before we started, it might be wise for us to get some face time with these nonprofits. So what we did was we hosted a workshop downtown with the Department of Technology, and we invited nonprofits to come by. We offered a small little workshop on how to get started with building out a cybersecurity program at a nonprofit. We pointed to some pro bono, affordable resources that they could use to kind of start building out some of their cyber resiliency efforts. But then we sat down with them and we just had a very honest conversation about like, what are you struggling with? What do you need? And what would be useful if the city could provide it? We were quite pleasantly surprised that the nonprofits were so candid with us. Many shared experiences of getting burned in terms of like experiencing a cyber incident. One nonprofit shared that they had fallen victim to a gift card scam and explained how that impacted their ability to deliver on some grants. Another nonprofit explained their issues with turnover in terms of staffing and how that can affect like knowledge of IT resources throughout the organization and credentials and things like that. So with these conversations, they helped us kind of identify topics that we wanted to learn more about in the survey. So we included that. And then we also turned to baseline cybersecurity controls to kind of guide the questions. So we looked at a lot of them, and the two that we relied the most on were the CIS security controls implementation group 1, which is like the baseline standard for cyber hygiene within an organization. And then we also looked at CISA's catalog of bad practices, which organizations that are a part of critical infrastructure or serving critical functions should definitely not do. So we included that in the survey as well. Then once we had a list we felt comfortable with, we did a 3-week pilot with the nonprofits. We asked for some feedback from them. We made it shorter. We removed a bit of technical jargon or provided some definitions along the way as they just needed a little bit of clarification. And then we deployed the survey. The survey had a couple of different parts to it. Ultimately, it was 20 questions. 15 questions asked about the cybersecurity resources that they have, and then the cybersecurity resources that they wanted. The second part of the survey we kept optional. This was about 5 questions. This focused on asking some questions about cyber hygiene. We kept this optional just because it was a lot of sensitive information, and it was at the request of the city. And it kind of gave us a baseline of nonprofits' current cybersecurity practices within their organization. So asking about MFA implementation across different platforms utilized by the organization, and software update cadence. As a carrot and stick incentive, we provided customized feedback to nonprofits. We learned in the workshop that nonprofits wanted us to make it worth their time and to provide, they were talking about how they were struggling to know where to start. So based upon the answers of that section, we were able to provide some first step guidelines, some toolkits, and to just kind of guide them for their first steps into this. And we received 68 responses to our survey. About 66% completed that optional survey addendum. And it kind of ran the gamut in terms of size. So for size of organizations that were surveyed, it ran from folks or nonprofits that had at least 2 full-time staff employees to 700, which is huge. And they provided a lot of important services to the city. The most common service was workforce development and employment services. So the nonprofits helping the members of our communities that are out of work and are looking for jobs. And the 2 other most common were arts and culture and housing support services. So what did we learn? What were our findings? And we walked away with 5 key findings that we're going to delve into deeper, and I'm going to hand it off to Sarah.
Great. Thanks, Shannon. We're going to go through these one by one, so don't worry about catching everything on this slide. And also, this is your reminder that if you have questions, especially about our findings, you should pull up Slido and type them out, because it's going to be a lot of information, a lot of graphs, and we genuinely want to go deeper, especially if folks are interested in them. So finding number 1, nonprofits are frequent targets of cybercrime and remain attractive targets by collecting sensitive information. Shocking, but it is actually really important to prove this with data versus just talk about it as if it's a problem, because it helps us get more resources towards it if we can prove it and if we have exact information about what resources are they lacking, what data are they collecting. So we did that. 85% of the nonprofits we surveyed had suffered at least one type of cyber attack. Overwhelmingly, and many of these can be combined, so you don't have to think of these as necessarily separate types of attacks. 85% described that as phishing, 32% business email compromise, 29% credit card or bank account fraud, very overwhelmingly financial fraud based, which totally makes sense for the sector. We weren't surveying very many political targets, so we're assuming that these are mostly commercial targets and trying to get after their finances. And 75% of nonprofits collect Social Security numbers. So this is one of our scariest takeaways. We knew that some of them collected sensitive information. We didn't know exactly how many nonprofits were collecting this kind of sensitive information. So we asked in particular contact information, names, home addresses. Almost everybody collected those. Social Security numbers, other sensitive non-public information, almost 3/4 of organizations collected that. And we also asked about financial information and health information, 61% and 32% respectively. So you can see that many of these organizations have data worth stealing, to be very honest. And that means that we need to either help them understand whether or not that data is important enough for them to collect. And if it is, we need to help them better protect that data. Finding number 2, nonprofits lack the staff they need to protect themselves against cyber attacks. Staffing is very important because cybersecurity is a human problem, and without humans there to help you understand, to help you walk through the issues, you're going to have a really hard time implementing the fixes that you need. So we surveyed this, and I think this is one of the most interesting parts of our finding. Over half of the organizations that we surveyed had absolutely no full-time IT staff. 21% of them had only one. So that's over 70% of them have one or less. And again, Shannon said, we're talking about organizations as small as 2 people, but as large as 700. And of the nonprofits that have any cybersecurity staff at all, IT or cybersecurity, the ratio of full-time IT to full-time and part-time staff at the organization is 1:96. So that means that for every full-time IT staff, they're responsible for securing about 100 people at the organization, which is a really, really high ratio. For context, the closest metric that we could find in the nonprofit sector for the ratio of full-time IT to full-time staff was about 1:33. So this is nearly 3 times higher. Here's the distribution. This is just a different way of looking at the same data. You can see that the vast majority of the organizations clustered around 0 and 1 full-time staff, and the rest hovered around 2, 3, 4. You can see that none of them had any more than 5 full-time IT staff, which is not surprising to us for reasons that we'll come to soon. So you might ask, well, if they don't have full-time IT staff, surely that they're hiring a vendor, they're outsourcing that, and someone else who has that expertise is providing them with these services. Not necessarily. So we asked about this, and not everybody understood whether or not they used an MSP or an MSSP or not, which is okay. We had that option, so there's the 24%. They don't know. 40% of them claim to use some sort of managed service. So that could be a managed security service, so maybe a SOC, or a managed service, so maybe IT. 37% said that they do not use MSPs. But what we assumed was that the folks that didn't have IT staff were using vendors instead. And what we found was the opposite, that organizations that already had full-time IT staff were more likely to use MSPs and MSSPs than those without. This idea that the cyber poverty line that you guys heard Wendy talk about this morning in her keynote perpetuates itself, that there are those that have and those that have not, and the have-nots really don't have anything. And that was sad for us to find, because we're thinking that there are many nonprofit organizations with no staff and no vendors that are really on their own here with cybersecurity.
We also found that nonprofits have moderate adoption rates of some of the most basic, essential, and empirically backed cybersecurity controls. However, there are gaps. So our findings here kind of indicated to us that nonprofits do, at least at some level, understand that they need to pay attention to cybersecurity. They have some level of like cyber literacy, but they do not have they often are not implementing these controls to like the fullest extent. So when we asked about MFA implementation, what we found were about 16% of nonprofits do not use MFA at all on any platform utilized by their organization. We also found that 61% of nonprofits do have MFA set up for email and collaboration tools. This was not totally surprising to us, especially as many of these nonprofits use platforms like Google Workspace or Microsoft Teams, which provide MFA and like prompt users to set it up. However, this gap, the 16%, the 61%, there's a lot of lack of coverage in terms of MFA deployment across all platforms utilized by the organization. And we suspect that this might be related to many nonprofits experiencing like phishing attacks or business email compromise. So this to us was quite concerning, but also not very surprising. We also asked about the cadence of computer software and operating system updates by nonprofits. The frequency kind of fell into two different groups. For 50%, it was relatively regular, and then for the other 50%, it was quite infrequent. So for the top 50%, around 34% have auto updates on their computer software and operating systems, and 16% update every single month. However, the 50% where it's a lot less clear, like 20% update whenever there's time, 20% update on an alternate timeline. This kind of conveyed to us that the organization probably doesn't have a policy and is probably not very frequently tracking. Many nonprofits also described a more frequent but still laggy update cadence, 7%, 6 to 12 months, and 3 to 6 months, 2%. So we also wanted to ask nonprofits directly, like what specifically is getting in the way of you addressing cybersecurity within your organization? We decided to ask this question in two ways. We had a free response section, but we also provided them a question where they were asked to like rank the types of obstacles that got in the way. We kind of composed this list by doing a literature review as well as like just from our knowledge in the field. So the kinds of barriers that we gave them were like our organization struggles to prioritize cybersecurity. Our organization doesn't necessarily know where to start with cybersecurity. Also, like options like leadership doesn't care about cybersecurity, or the culture of the organization is very resistant to the changes that a focus on cybersecurity would bring. So what we found is that around like 89% of nonprofits ranked prioritization in like their top 3 barriers. So this made sense as many nonprofits really do struggle to make that trade-off between do we invest invest like our time and our into focusing on cybersecurity when that doesn't seem entirely directly related to their mission of like opening a new food bank or hosting a new hosting an event for an arts and culture nonprofit. So we also found that the ranked number one barrier was funding. This also is unsurprising as nonprofits are often operating on a very small budget and oftentimes struggle to bring on full-time employees that are paid. As I mentioned, like some of these nonprofits only have 2 people working there and then often rely on an army of volunteers to carry out the service delivery of their organization. We also found that many nonprofits aren't able to spend the funding that they receive in donations or in grants on cybersecurity. Many nonprofits, as you can see here on this chart, receive grants from the city, from the state, from federal sources, foundations, and these grants oftentimes come with caps on overhead. They're funding programs that solve a particular problem, and then a small amount is dedicated to paying overhead costs like people's salary, rent, keeping the lights on. And that 10% has to cover a lot of different needs by the organization, including technology. And cybersecurity oftentimes just falls at the bottom of the list. So we identified that as a bit of an obstacle. So we could have stopped there. We could have asked, or we could have, like, from our understanding of the cyber hygiene of these organizations and our understanding of like their have-nots, make recommendations on what the city could provide. But what we didn't want our recommendations to exist in a vacuum and to not engage with the nonprofits about like what would actually be helpful to you. If the city provided it, would you actually use it? So we wanted to ask nonprofits directly, like, what kinds of resources would you find helpful? So we found that nonprofits, the top things that they needed and desired were a city helpline, different kinds of software and tools and proactive consulting. So what was interesting to us was that while in the previous finding, we found that funding was identified as the biggest barrier to like focusing on cybersecurity, it was one of the least ranked desired resources. What nonprofits really wanted were human solutions where a person was helping them walk through like deploying cybersecurity controls within their organization, someone to kind of explain. And that was also echoed through the workshop because a lot of nonprofits communicated that they just didn't have the cyber literacy to kind of get started with cybersecurity in their organization. So most folks wanted a city helpline, proactive consulting, and in terms of software and tools, what they were looking for were like password managers, email fraud detection tools, as well as SIM software.
Right, policy recommendations. So we ended up making 6 recommendations under 3 topic areas. And I want to caveat this by saying that there's a million things that could be done that would help nonprofits. We specifically focused our recommendations on something we could deliver to the city and county of San Francisco to say, here's what you could do. Here's what you uniquely as the city and county with your exact resources could contribute to this issue of nonprofit cybersecurity. So we focused on 3 areas: education, resource coordination, and implementation. The first piece was on education, and I'd like to say that this does not mean education that cybersecurity is a problem. Something that I hear a lot is that organizations don't care about cybersecurity, they don't know anything about it, they don't see it as a risk. That was not what we heard in this survey. What we heard was that they know that it's a problem and they just don't know what to do about it. They don't know what they could possibly do to make it better, and they don't know where to start, and they're overwhelmed. So when we say education, we're talking about connecting them to useful resources, to grant funding, to someone that they can call if they're hit with a ransomware attack. Those are the types of education pieces that we thought that they needed. So the first is providing regular cybersecurity advice and assistance. So this is aiming at solving the problem of where do I start? We actually worked with the CISO of the City and County of San Francisco, wonderful person, and he actually volunteered to sort of serve as a virtual CISO for these nonprofits. He's like, I would love to be in a capacity where I can actually take their calls and give them advice without them having to hire a full-time IT person. We said, great, we're going to put that in our report. We hope you do that. Number 2 is host an annual cybersecurity convening, something that we weren't expecting out of the workshops that we held before we even sent the survey out was how valuable the nonprofits found it to just be connected to people at the city who knew things about cybersecurity and to people in the regional cybersecurity community. So we brought in a representative from the San Francisco FBI field office and from the local CISA Region 9 cybersecurity advisor. And they found it so valuable even to get the basic talk from those people about what they should do, to send them a few resources via PDF. That was immeasurably helpful for these organizations to have a face and a number to call when they're in trouble. So we recommended that the city actually host that as a regular convening, bring in folks from CISA, bring in folks from the FBI, bring in local companies that are willing to offer free tools, and really use their convening power as the city to help connect nonprofits to resources that they probably don't know about. Second set of recommendations is on resource coordination. So probably one of the easiest things for them to do is create a web page. They actually have a ton of resources. You all probably know 100 more toolkits that they could possibly use. We in the security field know of these resources, and the folks in nonprofits don't. And if you've ever tried Googling help cybersecurity, the thing that you need is not the first thing that comes up. So we talked to the city about being a convener for these resources. They also help small businesses. They also help hospitals and utilities, just collecting some of the basic cybersecurity knowledge pieces and saying, we as the city, we use these, we endorse these. These are, your one-stop shop is very helpful. Number 4, funding opportunities. So we talked earlier about that 10% overhead cap. That was a huge finding for the city to say, oh, actually the grants that we're giving, they're not enough to protect the services that we're funding. So we recommended 2 different ways that they could go about this. One, to carve out another 1 to 3% of each grant just for technology, so that they actually protect that funding for the nonprofit. This is something we talked to them about. If you just increase the overhead, it's going to get sucked in by all those other things that we need to spend overhead on. If you tell us that we have to spend X% of this grant on technology, it'll help us invest it in what it needs to go to. And the second opportunity is actually creating a separate grant fund for cybersecurity to do sort of a bulk investment in either hiring cybersecurity staff or procuring much needed tools for those nonprofits. And lastly, we talked about implementation, a couple creative solutions that we found. We tried not to recommend anything that would force the city to raise millions of dollars, as we found that to be pretty unlikely for cybersecurity at this point in time. So number one, hosting student summer interns. We're in the Bay Area. We are fortunate enough to have Berkeley and many other amazing institutes of higher education with really talented students that have the perfect level of knowledge to help nonprofits with those sort of basic cybersecurity controls. We talked about the clinics earlier, so we really encourage the city to make use of internships as a win-win solution, as a way to provide students with more experience actually applying their knowledge to a real organization and providing nonprofits low-cost cybersecurity risk advisory services. And lastly, we recommended that the city provide local nonprofits with low-cost access to critical cybersecurity tools and software. This is something that they were really excited about, the idea to be in the heart of Silicon Valley and to actually connect with the companies that call San Francisco their home and try and use those resources to better protect the nonprofits that take care of the people that live here.
So San Francisco is really unique in that like their Department of Technology is thinking about how they can extend city resources to organizations that are not necessarily a part of the city's infrastructure, but like are a part of like the city's objectives related to like providing citizen services. Not every city is able to do this, but large metropolitan cities oftentimes are. Cities like New York, often like New York City Cyber Command provides cybersecurity assistance and support to small businesses. San Francisco is thinking about doing some of these things for nonprofits, cultivating cyber resilience at the super local level. However, by and large, this can be challenging for many cities to accomplish. But so when we were thinking about what we wanted to do for the next iteration of this project, we wanted to engage with more capable actors in government, specifically at the state level. So what we've done is we've been able to secure a partnership with the state government to focus on nonprofit cybersecurity and to accomplish a couple of different objectives. So we want to survey hundreds of nonprofits throughout a specific state to gather data on their cybersecurity challenges and assess regional variance. We want to identify ways that state and local governments can actually extend their IT and cybersecurity resources to support these nonprofits. We want to connect nonprofits also to pro bono or discounted cybersecurity resources. And we want this research, this next step, to inform cybersecurity policy and long-term cybersecurity strategy of the state towards public interest organizations. States also manage a lot of different grants. They manage a lot of money coming from the federal level, also generate funding at the state level that gets doled out to nonprofits. So the state actually is very well positioned to create some upstream solutions that eventually trickle down and can help more municipalities to kind of take on this kind of regional cyber resilience role. Also, I would just note that currently at the federal level, things are changing quite a bit. For the last 6 years, there's been an effort at the federal level to provide different pieces of critical infrastructure, more cybersecurity support, and that's kind of changing. More responsibility is being pushed over to the states, so the states are going to have to take a bigger leadership role than they're already doing to assess and assist for cyber resilience of like these different pieces of critical infrastructure like nonprofits, rural hospitals, small utilities. So we thought it might be great to partner with the state government. Also, we've updated our methodology and we have like an implementation component so that this research translates to action pretty much immediately. So this is the boring part. This is about methodology and how it's going to change. Just to fly through it quite quickly, we wanted to improve our methodology and rely on our friends at Indiana University and Purdue University. They've run a great project called CyberTrack, which is doing cybersecurity assessments for all state and local governments throughout the state of Indiana for the government to kind of guide cybersecurity strategy at the state level. So the way that they do it is they do it in two forms. They do like interviews as well as a survey. And they use the trusted CI framework, core pillars, as well as the CIS controls implementation group 1, but like a distilled down version of the most impactful 12. So we're doing a variation of this, and this is just kind of demonstrating what it is. So the Trusted CI framework is a minimum standard for cybersecurity programs. It takes a holistic approach that prioritizes leadership, culture, and government structures that would support a secure, like a mature cyber program, rather than just focus on a narrow checklist of technical controls. And we distilled this down to around 5 of the musts. There's 16 of them that we believe would be most impactful for nonprofits. We also, for IU and Purdue, what they did was they compared a couple of gold standard studies against the CIS framework, and doing so, they found the most empirically backed top 12 that makes the difference for organizations. We reduced this down to 5 of them that we think will make the difference for nonprofits. So we're going to survey that, compare, see if there's like a relationship between the CIS core pillar implementation as well as the CIS controls. We're also going to do qualitative interviews with both local nonprofit leaders and state and local government. For nonprofit leaders, we want to understand at a deeper level their experiences with cyber attacks and how it affects their resources and their organizations writ large, as well as for state and local government. We want to talk with them and understand what kind of solutions do they think at their level, from their perspective, they can actually implement quickly to address this nonprofit cybersecurity problem. And lastly, the part that kind of involves maybe most relevant to you is the implementation component. At our launch event, not only do we want to launch this data and this report, but we want to have an opportunity to have an expo for these nonprofits to come face to face with folks who can provide them immediate assistance. So cyber volunteering organizations that provide pro bono consulting services, again, with the FBI and CISA local offices, ISACs that specialize for nonprofit work, and university students looking for internships and to get that kind of, to use their cybersecurity education to make the difference for nonprofits, but also specifically industry partners that can help provide things like tabletop exercises, cybersecurity tools and software. And just to close, we're looking for implementation partners in industry who might be able to help us as we kind of pass on those resources to nonprofits and hand them off, so that once they leave that event where we're launching our report, they'll have more resources than they did before. So if you're interested in getting involved, feel free to email me, Shannon Pierson, at this email. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but thank you so much. And we also have some stickers up here if you're interested.
Great job, Sarah and Shannon. A couple of questions for you, and you can also ask more via Slido if you want to. So first of all, I work at a legal aid organization. We are constantly switching vendors for essential functions, example, software phones, in order to keep costs down. Could this vendor churn negatively affect our security posture?
Could what negatively affect? Just the switching vendors?
Yeah.
I think turnover is a big problem, and that's not just in technology, but also in staff. Nonprofits have one of the highest staff turnover rates of all industries. So anytime you're losing knowledge of how to protect a tool, or you're losing someone who knows how to do that organization's processes, it just makes it more difficult. So potentially.
What did you see in the survey about BYOD, or bring your own device challenges?
Yeah, this was really tricky. We know that bring your own devices are pervasive in nonprofits, particularly because they make use of so many volunteers and they just don't have the capacity to provide each of them their own device. We didn't get to the point where we felt comfortable recommending EDR solutions for nonprofits. They're just not at the point where that would be a viable recommendation for them, but that is something that we'd like to consider for the next round.
last one. I know, Shannon, you covered this towards the end, but a very direct question. Is there an easy way for security engineers like those in this audience to help nonprofits with cybersecurity?
Yes, absolutely. We actually run a network of different cyber volunteering organizations where folks from industry are helping respond to cyber incidents like at the state level, as well as like just assisting nonprofits or like even small utilities. It's called the Cyber Resilience Corps, and it's a coalition of all these different cyber volunteering organizations, and we'd be happy to connect you. That would be the best way to kind of get volunteering right away in kind of a coordinated way where they already have established relationships with nonprofits to get you connected.
Yeah, and just one more shout out. One of the members of the Cyber Resilience Corps that works specifically with nonprofits is called the Cyber Peace Institute's Cyber Peace Builders Program. You can actually sign up as an individual volunteer there, and they have a great matching platform where you talk a little bit about your expertise, and they'll match you with a nonprofit for a very specific limited time frame task, such as like, please help me configure my firewall. And they've actually done like, I think hundreds to thousands of hours of volunteer matching through that service.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to our speakers.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Round of applause.